Good morning, everyone, and good evening for those of you who are online. There's a few people coming. I know it's early morning for some of the participants, and I also am aware that we have a short period of time, an hour, to really dig into an interesting topic here on citizen-generated data to leave no one behind. So we'll get started, and I think a few more people will trickle in the doors here in person and virtually online as well. So I really want to welcome you all. Thank you so much for joining us. And I want to get started for those of us who are here in an interactive way. So there's a QR code up on the screen, and I think also there'll be a link in the chat for those of you who are online. And it's a Mentimeter quiz, so I'll give you a minute to get the QR code. You can grab your phone or device with a camera. It's just a few quick questions. It's to get us awake and really geared up to think about citizen-generated data. I think everyone's getting it on their phones. All right, so then I'm going to switch over so that I can launch the poll. All right, so the first question is, what word comes to mind when thinking about citizen-generated data? So go ahead, I think you can give a response in there. Any word, I think you can just type it in. Well, okay, great. Phone, quick, real. So this will make a nice word cloud of what people are thinking this morning or this evening if you're joining us from Asia. Oh, can someone put the code? All right. We have code 940-75719. I'll give us a few minutes so those can join. Okay, inclusiveness, rapid, local, quick, partnership, citizen-specific, phone. Yes, exactly. These are all of the things that should be top of mind as we're jumping into this topic. So thank you for sharing. We have two more questions. Let me get to the next one. All right, what is considered citizen-generated data? We have data provided by citizens with their consent, data produced by non-state actors, data used to monitor issues that affect citizens directly, or all of the above. All right, I see some responses coming in. We have all of the above. That's what we're thinking of here, all of the above. So we'll get into many of these details from all the speakers that we'll hear from to talk more about each of these specific elements and even more of citizen-generated data. And then a question for you: would you be interested in contributing to citizen-generated data? Absolutely, maybe, but what about privacy? No, or need to understand a little bit more first. There's no right or wrong answer. All right, we're in the right room. Great, you're here. I'm glad we didn't get any no's, but maybe we could change some minds with the discussion this morning. So thank you so much for doing a little bit of a warm-up with us. All right, we have more people joining, more people who want to learn more. You're also in the right room. Also some concerns about privacy. So I'm going to get us started. My name is Juliet Braslow. I'm with the Economic and Social Commission of Asia and the Pacific. And we are really excited to dive into this topic that's come up over and over again, I think in every session that I've been in this HLPF, about data gaps, and how we can fill them. So I think this is a great session to talk about some innovative ways that are inclusive and link with all of those ideas that everyone had this morning or this evening, for those of you joining us online. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heather Page, a statistician in the UN Statistics Division, to give us some more details and background as we launch into the topic today. Okay, great.
Can you hear me? Hi, thanks so much. My name is Heather Page. I'm with UN Statistics Division, and we're really excited to partner today with ESCAP for this VNR lab. So I have just a few slides to introduce a little bit about citizen-generated data. It's linked to the SDGs and also the newly launched collaborative. So citizens' contribution to data, broadly defined as the engagement of citizens in multiple processes along the data value chain, is increasingly recognized for its unique ability to help overcome many data challenges and in contributing to the inclusiveness of official statistics. And this type of data occurs at all different levels, can be organized by myriad stakeholders, and can help to ensure the voice of marginalized population groups inform policy, and also help to drive change on issues affecting local groups, among others. When people, especially those who have been historically excluded from decision-making, actively participate in decisions about data collection, design, analysis, and the use of this data, they gain greater access to the benefits of data, meaning that their voices are heard and counted. And as stressed in the concept note for this event, CGD is also a great channel for NSOs to engage and connect directly with citizens and to further improve transparency, inclusion, as well as accountability. And so this is also highly linked to 3 of the 5 core principles underpinning the 2030 Agenda: leaving no one behind, inclusiveness, and also multi-stakeholder partnerships. And CGD is also recognized for helping to fill data gaps that cannot otherwise be collected through traditional data sources, as well as strengthening partnerships and mobilizing resources. We're also seeing more citizen-generated data and its processes included in the VNR processes by countries, engagement with stakeholders, not only to fill data gaps, but also to validate data in the VNRs, to provide context, to provide qualitative information and understanding of the data, not only at national level, but regional and local levels, as well as providing shadow and also parallel reporting for these VNRs in countries. Okay, and so the importance of citizen-generated data is also increasingly recognized by national statistical offices. The 54th session of the UN Statistical Commission this past March emphasized the importance of CGD and stressed the need to develop a conceptual framework on citizen-generated data. The Commission also supported the establishment of a collaborative on citizen data, which aims to provide a space to share knowledge and experiences and foster collaboration among different communities. And at the Commission, chief statisticians met and discussed normative work and also capacity building at the international level, and the role of citizen data as a source that can either be integrated or used in parallel and as a supplement to official statistics was also affirmed. So essentially with this work, the global statistical community is moving towards a framework to harness data by citizens, for citizens, and about citizens. So as I mentioned, the collaborative aims to provide a space to share knowledge and experiences, but it's also for supporting the building of tools and guidance for both national statistical offices and also civil society organizations regarding the integration of CGD with official statistics, also looking at quality assurance elements, and also to help identify specific conceptual and methodological gaps and areas where the collaborative can be useful and aid not only NSOs but also CSOs. And so CGD processes can benefit from the specialized knowledge of communities, human rights experts, statisticians, governments, and others to create a dynamic and inclusive ecosystem for data. And this is an opportunity to really join forces to promote the collaboration between NSOs, CSOs, and other producers of CGD for inclusive data ecosystems and citizen-driven reporting for the SDGs to inform public policy. So I just have a last slide kind of on the next steps in case you are interested as well for the collaborative. We will have a call for contributions on specific case studies and information that we can share among the public about CGD data and its impacts, as well as the collaboration among CSOs and NSOs as well. And then we will also have an expert group meeting in September to really kind of dive a little bit more into that conceptual framework, as well as a roadmap on the way to the Statistical Commission in 2024. So thank you so much. I will now pass it to Liliana, our moderator for the session.
Thank you very much, Heather, for this overview. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the participants, and let me welcome also our distinguished panelists on this discussion. So my name is Liliana Suchodolska. I'm a policy analyst from Paris 21. It's a partnership in statistics for development in 21st century. I'm delighted to be here and to moderate this panel that represents the voices of national statistical offices, the government, and civil society actors. So I'm very happy to actually give the words and the voice to speakers. But let me just say that though this is a VNR lab, we are not going to experiment on anyone here unless they exceed their speaking time. We have many speakers. So let me connect now with the representative of Nepal. So I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Ram Hari Gare, the director and senior statistician in the Statistical Analysis and Publication section of the Ministry of Women, Children and Senior Citizens of Nepal. Mr. Gare, the floor is yours. So let me start with the first question to you. Welcome. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about the potential of data collaborations that you see in Nepal, and what kind of data gaps you think they could close in your context.
Thank you, Liliana. Good morning, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. I'm from Kathmandu, Nepal. Namaste. I would like to thank the organizer for providing this floor opportunity to me to share my experience. In fact, in Nepal's case, there is a long list of national priority indicators. There are periodic plans, annual budgets, programs. So the indicator needs to be in line with those plans and budgets. In fact, users' engagement strategy is the major indicator that can bring CSOs with NSO so that we can work together. CBS can, NSO, CSO can contribute, complement the information that has been delivered since long by the NSOs. So in Nepal's case, there are the traditional data collection methods are not sufficient. So we realize a huge data gap. So we in Nepal's case, there are some CSOs, they are working in the local level, and due to the new administrative structure in Nepal, so the information that they are provided, generated in the local level can be useful for local level planning. So this is one example that we utilize in Nepal's case. So for the remaining part in Nepal's history, if we go for the government structure, so we have three tiers of government in Nepal: federal level, central government, 7 provincial government, and 753 local governments are there to have a budget and plans accordingly to formulate the programs in their respective governments. So official statistics in Nepal's issues are, there are limited in scope, and the frequency of the data production is very low. And another problem that we are facing is the duplication of data production, and there is a special gap in some areas of data requirements. So we need coordination among data producers, data providers, and data users. So that has been felt since long. In CSO's part, they can in fact contribute. NSO expect more to complement the qualitative data type of data rather than quantitative data from the CSO. And community data should also be adhered by fundamental principles of official statistics. And CGD should be consistent with national indicators. So these are the preliminary requirements that any NSO has. And CGD is more useful, especially for local level planning rather than generating national indicators. So If we talk about the major sectors of indicators, they are readily available, like population, literacy, health status of children and women. They are available more regularly, but other indicators, they are not regularly available. And even if they are available, their subgroups and their geographic disaggregation is not available. So there is a need that can be supported by CSOs. And traditional census, sample surveys, and administrative records are not enough, that we mentioned before. So one of the open source data that can be used are there, but they don't represent, in fact, the marginalized societies of the country. So we CSO's role is very important to provide such information. Though they are qualitative, they might be case studies rather than probabilistic sampling type of data information. And geographic coverage and population of interest is, as expected, is low by the CSOs they produce. They cannot go for national level indicators. However, they can be utilized to supplement official statistics in national case. And if you think about the quality of the data that can be produced, that are produced by the CSOs, so capacity enhancement of the CSOs is needed, as they are not very much trained on like National Statistical System organizations. So there is a need to be a pool. I think NSO can take a lead on this. This is one aspect. Another one is the collaboration is in fact needed. NSO, National Statistical System units, and citizen generated data producers. And building trust. This is another part that we realize. So there need to be trust. Generally, statisticians, they need to trust on the citizens' data, though they need to be further scrutinized. And NSO can take a role model, and there should be appreciation by the NSO to the other CSOs, the data that the information that they produce. And the experience that we have last year, there was a program with CSOs and NSO together, and NSO group, CSO groups had produced a toolkit in Nepal's case. So I think it is the starting point for the generation of the data by the civil society. And in the long run, we believe, because there is a long list of data indicators that we require. So CSO in the future, maybe they can be instrumental to provide the information that the government requires in all levels, maybe in the central level, provincial level, or local level. I think these are the points that I like to highlight from NSO's perspectives.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hare. I really appreciated your intervention. I'm not sure that all of you know, Mr. Gaire has actually been working for the National Statistical Office of Nepal before. So his perspective is representing both the NSO perspective and the ministry. And I really value your actually vision on how that citizen-generated data can contribute to the local level planning, providing both qualitative and quantitative information. This is a very good insight. So let me now turn to our next speaker from Ghana. So I'm delighted to welcome Professor Samuel Anim, the government statistician from Ghana Statistical Service. Dr. Anim, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the Ghana experience, Ghana Statistical Service experience in using citizen-generated data, and highlight also the success of it, because we know you have been using it for a while. And if you could share with us the insights of what contributed to that success.
Thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So it's a delight for Ghana to share with you our experience with citizens-generated data. As you rightly indicated, we've been engaging with citizens-generated data for some time now, and we are happy to indicate that we currently have 5 different projects in the area of citizens-generated data. 3 of them have well taken off, and we are seeing the evidence of it, and 2 of them we've just started. So in terms of our experience, I'll quickly run through these 5 areas where we are engaging with citizen-generated data. And Heather, thank you for mentioning the March event which Ghana represented to showcase some of these. And I must emphasize that at that meeting, we did indicate that we should have clarity in our mind what CGD can do, especially when, as a national statistician, your first baptism has to do with the fundamental principles of official statistics. And you are getting into an area that seems to veer off from the fundamental principles of statistics. So our first experience is related to the gender-based domestic violence, which we started on a pilot basis. Ghana has 261 administrative districts, and we started this with 30 districts. And the first thing I want to say about CGD is that, as Heather indicated, it is participatory, but 2 other dimensions to CGD is the fact that you need to do it on a pilot basis, see the evidence, and scale it up. So unlike our official statistics, the approach to getting into CGD is slightly different. And then CGD, as was indicated earlier on, is oriented towards problem solving. And that is how we approach the gender-based violence. And the success that we see in there is not just the fact that it enabled us to report on 3 out of the 17 SDG goals, specifically 5, 11, and 16. But as I indicated earlier on, we saw the evidence in the 30 districts, and then based on our collaboration with the funder, it's now being scaled up to another 30 districts, making it 60. What that means is that we need to be careful in reporting it as a national statistics and deal with it more of a subnational, local level statistics. The other area that we've engaged CGD is in the area of waste management. And with both waste management and the gender-based domestic violence, we have to develop technologies that enables us to engage with the citizens. And that is the other area that I want to bring on board. CGD involves quite a number of different stakeholders. And one of the success stories is related to the fact that you conceptualize it with them, you co-create it with them, and then they own it. Unlike other statistics that is strictly independently driven by national statistical offices. And again, in this area on waste management, the success story is that we are reporting on SDG 11, and it goes beyond the reporting on that, and we are also scaling it up. And the third area that we've engaged CGD has to do with marine litter management, which again, we are using an app. Citizens are reporting to us waste that has been dumped across the ocean that we have. Again, we've not covered all the borders of our oceans, but definitely with the evidence that we are seeing in these areas, there's room to scale it up. Heather, you did mention one of the pillars of SDGs, which has to do with leave no one behind. And I think we all know that. And that is why now we want to test CGD in terms of the effectiveness of policy making among persons with disabilities. Ghana has a scheme called the District Assembly Common Fund Allocation. So the only way we can test the effectiveness of this policy intervention among a group that is vulnerable, that is likely to be sidestepped, is to use this app, where they tell us their experiences in how this District Assembly Common Fund allocation helps with that. And lastly, we have started collaboration with UNDP, which touches on governance in the area of SDG 16. And again, that is where we are trying to use SGD. So we need to have clarity in our minds, and I like the way it was said. It is complementing official statistics. It has a long way to go, and we need to build it up gradually insofar as it's helping us, one, solve local problems, and we can only scale it up when we've seen evidence of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anyum, especially highlighting the shift. The shift of power that is taking place, where you actually co-create these data sets with civil society and ensure that they own it. And I'm really looking forward to see how it unfolds in Ghana. Let me now turn to our speakers representing civil society organizations. So I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Elizabeth Lockwood from CBM Global, Disability Inclusion and the Stakeholder Group on Persons with Disabilities. Hello. So I was wondering, Dr. Lockwood, if you could tell us a bit about your experience in actually establishing trustful relationships based on data collaboration between the NSO and the CSOs representing marginalized population. Over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, ESCAP and UN Statistics Division for inviting me to speak. My good practice that I'm explaining today is based on organizations of persons with disabilities in the Pacific region. And this is very much led by the Pacific Disability Forum. And I want to thank them for sharing this wonderful example with me. The Pacific Disability Forum is a constituency of 71 organizations of and for persons with disabilities in the Pacific region. And they have advocated for disability data advocacy very strongly in the region with partnerships. In 2015, PDF, which I'll call them now, started to work closely with the Kiribati OPD to successfully advocate for the inclusion of the Washington Group short set of questions, disability questions, in their upcoming national census. And while this was a good step, the risk was that data would be collected but then not used, analyzed, and used. So PDF met with a statistical commissioner to advocate for disability disaggregated data analysis and reporting across a number of outcomes, including health, education, and water and sanitation. And through this process, it became clear that there was lack of expertise in this area with the NSOs and also the organizations of persons with disabilities. So consequently, PDF partnered with the UNICEF Regional Office and the Secretariat of the Pacific Community Statistics, SPC, to create an analysis around this, and they created what they call a disability monograph. So it started in Kiribati, and then it went on into Fiji, Palau, Samoa, Tonga, and Tuvalu. Since Fiji's reporting today, I'll look a little bit more on Fiji right now. So in 2017, the government of Fiji, through its Bureau of Statistics, did incorporate the Washington Group short set of questions in its National Population and Housing Census to collect disability data, because previously it had been done differently with different methodologies and wasn't harmonized. In 2019, they created their disability monograph as well, and it had a detailed analysis of this data from their census, exploring the situation of children, women, and men with disabilities in respect to their living conditions, education, economic activities, and health. And these results and the analysis has contributed to Fiji's development policies, legislation, and implementation of mainstreaming disability. This report was produced out of a disability analysis workshop in 2019, and it was organized in a multi-stakeholder fashion with SPC, PDF, and UNICEF. And the workshop provided capacity building for the national statistic offices for Fiji, Tuvalu, and Tonga. And as a result, the Washington Group short set of questions were put into the current census in Fiji in 2017, in Tuvalu in 2017, in Tonga in 2016, and also in 2018 in Tonga in their National Disability Survey. And the report is very important because it links to the SDGs, and it also demonstrates that despite interventions in Fiji, persons with disabilities are left behind in comparison with their counterparts without disabilities, especially in terms of education and economic activities. Persons with disabilities are less likely to have attended school, and if they do, they usually do not finish secondary level or beyond. In terms of economic participation, most persons with disabilities are not employed, and they are seeking employment, so their livelihoods are significantly affected and limited. And in summary, from the Pacific Disability Forum, they share that the key in establishing trustful data relationships from their perspective is being credible and understanding the Washington Group short set tool and how it's implemented, being responsive, continuing to build relationships and to find opportunities to engage further, and being present at the table with the technical skills required to contribute meaningfully. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lockwood. That's a great example how actually statistics office can also benefit from these partnerships and make sure their data collection tools actually represent those who are left behind. Thank you for that intervention. Let me now turn to Mongolia. We have with us Dr. Indra Tumurbatar, Director of Environment, Social Governance Mindset of Mongolia. Welcome. I would like to ask you what is the situation of Mongolia with regards to the use and awareness about the citizen-generated data for the monitoring of SDGs, and whether there were any examples of that use in the context of this year's VNR. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Liliana. Thank you for this opportunity to share Mongolian experience in the citizen-generated data. So I would like to share about the experience we have in the CGD and also some challenges that we are facing. Okay, so it's everyone is aware that in each country there are CSOs that generate their own data. Yeah, and for example, in Mongolia we have established CSOs network on SDG. So we have in this network members 20 CSOs and 200 individuals. So this network we collect data and we develop SDG progress report prior to VNR, the national VNR. So we have developed two SDG report, one in 2019 and one in 2022 for the 2023 VNR. So now I would like to talk more about how we, collected data and used it for this report. So we have, as I mentioned, 20 members. So there are members working in different fields and different issues of SDGs. We have almost SDGs for almost all of the goals who are active in different issues. So, for example, one of our members, Food Coalition, they have conducted in 2020 a survey on the right to food involving 200 individuals from low-income families where members of the families are retired or disabled or unemployed or widows, or belong to the groups at most of the risk being left. So we they have found this very sensitive data that they have, limited access, that they are at risk of food, nutrition, lack. And also we have other members who collect data on education, the quality of education and inclusiveness of the education. Yeah, so in this way there's a lot of data. So what we use with this data was that we have used all those data to evaluate the implementation of SDG using scorecard mechanism, scorecard tool. So we have organized focus group discussions for each SDG goal to evaluate how it was progressed. Yeah, and then we have developed a report on the evaluation result, and that this report was communicated to the government, to the parliament, and also to other stakeholders in a national consultation that we have organized. And the government also has used that data. Well, they haven't used, but they have included this data in VNR report and showing that the CSO organizations have come up with their own evaluation, and the result was actually that there is a regress rather than progress, which was opposite to what the government is saying. Okay, so but at least they are aware of the result, and then they put it in the report, I think, which is a good thing. Yeah. But now the challenge is that there is this lack of formal mechanism to contribute to ensure engagement of multi-stakeholder contribution to the SDG. There is no platform for regular exchange of information. There is no digital engagement options at national level in Mongolia. So now we are developing metadata at national level. So we do not really have, good, timely data collected at official level, let alone the citizen-generated data. And it's also important that, the data of civil society-generated data are also integrated into the analysis of the national data, into making policies and so on. And because we believe that to ensure policy coherence and consistency across the sectors at the national and local levels, it's important that you have data and views at all levels, including those who are left behind. Yeah, so what we think is that in terms of formalization of CGD, there is no progress, unfortunately, in Mongolia. So we, as I said before, we still lack a formal institutional channel for gathering and analyzing CGD for official use. There are no guidelines and capacity in the NSO to accept and integrate CGD. And there's also some argument from professionals say that the data collected by CSOs cannot be considered as valid data because they are random, they lack nationwide representation, and so on. But we think that CSO-generated data is not intended to be nationwide representing, right? It's more focused on the left-behind groups. Yeah, so we are now in this period where we're trying to make the government accept this CGD and then integrate it into the database. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Timur Batar. I really appreciated your comment actually on that you work with the parliament of your country. I think that's also a good practice to undertake by CSOs, and I commend your efforts to improve the metadata collection. I think that's also a good opportunity for you to ensure that this data is uptaken by the government. Let me now turn to Mr. Ariel Otojan, Regional Advocacy and Campaigns Manager from the World Vision East Asia. So what I would like to ask you is, what is the value of communities that represent young people and children? What is the value of these civil society actors to actually engage with the government, with collaboration on data? What type of opportunities they can see for themselves?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Liliana, for that question, and thank you, ESCAP and UNSD for this opportunity to share. World Vision is a global humanitarian advocacy and development organization, and we work with children and communities, as you've mentioned. And we believe that children and communities are the heart and the center of the Sustainable Development Goals, and thus their perspective in the Voluntary National Review and SDG reports should be included. We acknowledge the initiatives and the innovations by the member states, UN systems, and other stakeholders in collaborating with the civil society organizations to expand the shrinking space for participation of communities in the SDGs. For citizen-generated data supports the development outcomes, and it encourages ordinary citizens, as our colleagues from CSOs mentioned, to participate in the decision-making process, tracking the progress of SDGs by sharing their insights and experiences. And you ask about the value add to them. What's in it for these ordinary citizens being part of this process? We have seen communities including children and young people, persons with disabilities, and vulnerable sectors participating in citizen-generated data to be able to identify success and gaps in the implementation of policies related to SDGs. They also maximize this data to collaborate with their local authorities, communes, and village authorities, and other actors on the delivery of basic services. So for them to be able to share their thoughts, their experiences, and to be able to be heard, it gives them the sense of empowerment and entitlement that they are actually part of the solution, and that this is one of the biggest factors that encourages them to meaningfully participate. It provides an opportunity to include citizens as agents of change, and their experiences offered more texture and detail in key areas that can supplement the available statistical measures. And communities are increasingly coming together to use their own data to help identify and address the more systemic problems and barriers that can hinder broader SDG progress at the local and even at the national and regional levels. For example, the citizen-generated data and citizen report cards on violence against children can help communities to remind their governments to their commitments on ending violence against children. And these communities' gathered evidences can complement data from national statistical agencies like NSOs, especially where data may be lacking on challenging topics like the violence against children. But I'm also delighted that our distinguished speaker from Ghana mentioned some good practices that perhaps we can replicate in our countries in Asia as well. In Vietnam, for example, different stakeholders established the Leave No One Behind partnership in Vietnam to ensure the participation of marginalized groups and ensure that they are heard, they are counted in the process of SDGs. Vietnam is reporting VNR this year, and last year in 2022, the Leave No One Behind Vietnam conducted a report entitled Citizen Generated Data, Community Voices on Achievement of Sustainable Development Goals, to reflect the perspectives of vulnerable groups, including children, youth, women, people with disabilities, ethnic minorities, and community-based organizations. It included 3,100 samples, and evidences from grassroots levels were collected across the country to reflect the vulnerable groups' perspectives of SDG improvements in 2022 and their forecast for SDG future progress in 2025. It included community surveys and focus group discussions with different groups in an age-appropriate and gender-sensitive manner. And the findings and recommendations are shared with the government for their consideration. Again, the CSOs, we don't have control which parts of the report of the citizen-generated data can be included in the VNR, but we're happy that these have been considered. And the participants from communities believe that they're able to contribute effectively to the SDG implementation, to the SDG monitoring, and even evaluation process, at least in that experience in Vietnam. It's been 8 years since the world made an ambitious promise to advance the well-being of the poorest, furthest behind, and most vulnerable communities. And we believe that we can still achieve it in the midpoint through sustainable investment, strengthened multi-sectoral coordination, and critically, intentional listening to those at the center of the SDGs, the communities themselves. Lastly, listening to communities, especially women, children, persons with disabilities, and the most vulnerable sectors, it may not be a simple process. And I think we've heard from our CSO speakers that it's really not a simple process, but it's all worth it. By empowering and enabling communities to have a direct participation, governments, civil societies, and even donors can better understand the complexity of delivering on a global agenda, adapt accordingly, and fulfill the promise of putting people at the center of SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention and highlighting how these communities can be actually, feeling as agents of change. I think that's very powerful, and I appreciate your example from Vietnam. So let me now make a full circle. We started with the government, and we will also close with the last speaker, who is representing the government of Maldives. I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Aman Khalil, a senior planning analyst from the National Planning Department of Maldives. Welcome. So I'd like to ask you, how do you think the civil society collaboration can or approach, how civil society can approach policymakers in the context of Maldives to start any successful data collaboration?
Okay. Thank you, Liliana. I'm from the Ministry of National Planning, Housing and Infrastructure. It's a big mandate for the ministry, and the NSO is under the broad umbrella of the ministry. So in a country like Maldives, which is geographically dispersed, it's very difficult for the collection of the data, and it's logistically also very difficult, and it's very challenging for us. And so the citizen-generated data would be a very useful method for us to collect data and also involve the CSOs in the process as well. And another benefit for the citizen-generated data is its potential for identifying the emerging issues and trends and patterns, because those CSOs are at the grassroots level, so they would be able to best identify the issues. And by analyzing these data from various sources, such as the citizen-generated data, the government would be able to early on identify the signs and also do the interventions and adjust the policies or even come up with new policies to address those. This could include environmental degradation and health outbreaks as well. Then CGD also would be enabled to create a better partnership, which would able to help in the whole of government approach for the sustainable development goals achievement. There are privacy concerns and data quality issues that must be addressed. But as our colleagues mentioned, we can do capacity building and come up with mechanisms that could address those. CSOs are not yet better understand how they can support the government with the citizen-generated data. So we can educate them and be in partnership with them so that we can better use those data to the development of the country. With this thought, Maldives carried out a user-producer dialogue with the CSOs and created a platform to discuss and understand the gender gaps within the Maldives. And during this process, many were not aware that the work they do generate the statistics and were not familiar with the concept of the CGD. And the response that we got was very low. So we changed our approach and we introduced how the CSOs can share, how it can benefit CSOs, the CGD, and shared a generalized questionnaire. So this approach, the response we got was pretty well, and this created a partnership as a first step that we can continue towards. And also, we did our census during the last quarter of 2022, and during that time when we were finalizing the questionnaire, we involved the CSOs and how better we can improve the questionnaire, including what are the areas that the CSO can support for the data. And it was a good partnership, and the response and even the participation of the CSOs were really good. So I think this would be a continued effort, and we hope that we could continue this partnership with the CSOs. And as I mentioned earlier, for the Maldives, and maybe I understand that it's very important for the other countries as well, but this ownership of the development of the country would enable only through involving the CSOs and the citizens as well. So thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khalil, for your intervention. And I think that's a very important point that you raised, that it's very important how governments communicate about this possibility of that kind of collaboration. And I think it's also a very important point for also the international community to support governments in ensuring that the awareness about such collaboration is well communicated, and all actors understand what kind of role they could play in that. So we still have a little bit of time. So I was wondering if we could open the floor for questions from the room, also from the online participants. We have with us, very knowledgeable experts from different stakeholder groups. So that's a good opportunity to ask any question you could imagine now. Please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Daniel. I'm working with Heather in UNSD. My question is actually directed to Professor Anim. Good to see you again. Ghana has been doing a significant amount of work. So you mentioned the 5 projects, and the 3 of them have gone through an extensive data collection verification process. As you know, for the SDGs, we have to collect these data sets on a periodic, at least annually, so you can measure progress. Is there any mechanism put in place how to kind of extend this data collection process with CSOs? Is there some formal arrangement with GSS and the CSOs to kind of do this on a continuous basis, as compared to most of the time this comes with some support from donors and things like that? Is there a way that GSS is thinking of mainstreaming it to the regular work process so that you can continue this further as we go along the years? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me start from the perspective of, and I guess your question is related to sustainability of SGDs in providing the statistics that is needed. I think the first issue is, what does the law on statistics allows us to do? And that is what we started some time back when we thought about CGDs. And the first thing you need to think about is whether your law allows you to put out both official and experimental statistics. And I think this is the bit that is missing in a number of laws across the globe. In our case, the law allows us to have both official statistics and experimental statistics. So in our mind, this is strictly on the basis of experimental statistics. And we have leverage on the support of donors just for the takeoff. And this relates to what I said earlier on. CGD should not be supply-driven. National statistical offices should not do it as a matter of adding on to your statistical product. It should be demand-driven. And once it's co-owned by the local government agencies, the CSOs, you respond to the question of sustainability. And that is exactly what we are doing. We've built their capacities. We've co-developed the technologies with them. So on a regular basis, we co-own the generation of these statistical products. So in my mind, the first thing has to do with what the law says, whether it gives room for you to put out experimental statistics while we wait for the global community to conceptualize it, put a methodology on it. We'll continue to target as such. The last thing I want to say is that this fits into the broad change in our narrative on what statistical products are. And I said that earlier, we've overemphasized official statistics, and we've overemphasized the national statistics. This is the opportunity for us to contextualize things. So for us in Ghana, in the last 1 year, a lot of our statistical products are not consistent with the mundane statistical products that you see across a number of countries, because we have that broad mindset that we want to change the narrative on the scope and utilization of statistical products.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anim. We also have a question from the online participants. Maybe I'll share it with all of you, and we'll see if there's any volunteer who would like to answer. Catherine Keane asks, are you including any way to address issues of global aging? And what could be the benefits as well as challenges of including such data as part of the CGD? I don't know if any of our speakers would like to answer that question.
I mean, I was expecting my other colleague too, because you mentioned the fact that data on vulnerable groups are missing, and this is where we need to think about it. And again, in this area, we don't need anything like representativeness on these vulnerable groups. So what we did with our census is to have a special session for the elderly group, and now what we're thinking about is how do we get their voices? And the only way we can get their voices is through CGDs.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anim. Yes, we have another question from the floor.
Yes, thank you so much. So I'll be having a question and also remarks. I'm from the Indigenous Peoples Major Group for Sustainable Development, one of the major groups and other stakeholders here. And also my organization is the focal point for the Indigenous Peoples constituency in the Asia Pacific. So my question is also related to the earlier question about the elderly. So the inclusion of indigenous peoples or the data disaggregation by ethnicity. So we are calling for disaggregated data for by ethnicity. And with that, since I did not hear any about collecting data with indigenous peoples, I want to introduce the Indigenous Navigator. It's an initiative funded by the European Union, which we are implementing in more than 20 countries in the world. So it's a community-generated data, where the community, the indigenous peoples themselves, are the one who are collecting the data. And this looks the implementation of universal instruments such as United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Sustainable Development Goals. So yeah, that's the Indigenous Navigator, and the question is on data disaggregation by ethnicity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that resource with us. So if there are no further questions, let me handle it back to Juliet to close the meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing your examples and your insights, and also some calls for what can happen next for the future. We really could see how the citizen-generated data and the different approaches and innovations allow for more engagement. We heard a lot about ownership, the importance of communication as it's also still being defined, so we get to that clarity of what does it mean, how can it be engaged, how can it be incorporated in what is shared officially as well. And so I think one of the keys is that I took away from this discussion as well is that it does allow this context, some of these difficult issues and this context that sometimes can't be given that level of granularity, as some of the speakers said, to really have a better understanding of where we stand in implementing the SDGs and where there are some of those key leverage points as we're all talking about the midpoint and how we can accelerate action to reach those goals or get as close as we possibly can by 2030. So hopefully you all also learned from some examples or able to connect and reach out to those who might have lessons that you can learn because these labs are also about connecting with one another and learning in the context of the VNR and beyond and what comes next. So I want to thank you all, thank the co-organizers, the moderator, and all of the examples that you shared, and all of you for joining us early in the morning or late in the evening for those of you, or afternoon, those of you online. I think we had over 50 participants online. So thank you again, and we hope to be hearing more about what comes next in the area of citizen-generated data to leave no one behind.